All right, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the Alteryx Ace series, where we're going to be talking about scale to success with Alteryx Server. My name is Andrew Kim from Data Meaning. We also have Dallas and Fernando joining us here today, and we're going to be discussing how to scale with the Alteryx Server on both our LinkedIn Live channels as well as YouTube. Please feel free to hit that like or love button and invite your friends. This is part of the Data in the Wild series. And let's go ahead and get today started off. It's part of the 3-part series where we'll be discussing the Alteryx Ace environment as well as how to get your server scaled. And to get to know everybody today, we've got a fun question, and that's, what's your favorite thing to connect to with Alteryx? And let's start with Fernando on this one.
Yeah, okay. Let me think about it. I think it's not my favorite thing, but it's the thing that helped me the most. So since my mom is 7 years old now, and she needs to take a lot of medicines, and every single month she asks me to search for the best prices. So I think she have 8 to 9 medicines to take, and I need to go gather around, I think, from 5 to 6 sites. So I develop a workflow that searches all the pharmacies, and that returns to her the best price for her to go there and buy everything at the best price. So that's been great for me too. I think for saving time actually.
Nice, nice. Dallas, that's going to be a tough one to top. What do you got connecting to?
Well, yeah, that's right. I like to connect to. There are a couple of things actually I like to connect. One of them, I think first, I think web scraping is really cool with Alteryx, and it's not that hard to do. So basically, I love to connect to different websites using the download tool. And also, what I also like is how easily you can connect to Twitter, for example, to get some like some trend information and things like that. And it can easily deploy a workflow and output that data to somewhere using either the Twitter connector. I think the Twitter connector is a little bit outdated now, but it still can be used. But yeah, in web scraping to different websites like stock pricing and even get like different currencies. So I guess that's really easy and cool to do in Alteryx. It's a really good learning experience.
Nice. I think it's kind of a toss-up for me, and I guess technically they're the same company now. It would be the Salesforce connector, just because marketing has always held a special place in my heart, and that connector is pretty cool because it lets you has like the query builder in there. You can do like selecting. It has all the security features on there, and it's just kind of grown over time. The other one is Tableau, right, which has been purchased by Salesforce. I love that one just because I've always loved visualizations and kind of telling a story, and it just gets me excited knowing that I get to help someone sell the sizzle, like over there at with the visualization side of analytics. Those are my favorite ones. And as we
Yeah,
kind of
and as you're just talking about connectors, one cool thing, it's not my favorite, but it's one of those that really helps is the MongoDB connector in
ooh,
Alteryx,
yeah.
where you can query your server data. So we are going to talk about APIs tomorrow, but another really cool way to query the data in your server is using the MongoDB connector, which is really simple to use. It provides you a table format for all the data, even though MongoDB is NoSQL. So it's pretty useful.
Yeah, and I think as we're kind of talking about these different aspects, right, in relation to connectors, there's really a couple different camps that it kind of falls in. One are those standard out of the box connectors, that use like ODBC connections, and you can even use any ODBC with Alteryx, right, with the generic ones. And then the other ones, you can see, like, I think with the ACEs, it becomes more common to, hey, I've got my own special stuff that my secret sauce that I want to integrate in here by doing some web scraping and other things. And that's what I really like, is the ability to tackle any of the insights and analytics that you want at any level, and you can do that in the same platform. You're not even going to have to switch platforms to do that. So
Yeah,
let's.
I think that's true. So sorry, but
Yeah.
once I saw in the community is someone that connected Alteryx to the light bulbs. So I'm not sure it's that practical, but it's something that you can do also with Alteryx. So that's the beauty of it.
Oh yeah, they have some fun stuff. Yeah, I do have it here in a drawer. I may have to dig it out. All of the Raspberry Pi stuff. So if you've never checked out Raspberry Pis, those are pretty sweet. That's like some straight up coding stuff. But they have another line. It's called an Adreno, and those allow for like sound as well as the light functionality, like you're talking about. And I remember that was, I think, 2018. During Inspire, they did a session where they literally had the, I better not say it out loud, the Amazon Echo, before I trigger all of them here, the Amazon Echo triggering an Alteryx workflow. So like you can definitely get creative. I mean, if you are like, I need my cup of coffee and I'm going to trigger this workflow, you can just say all that at once and then like start your morning flow with coffee and some insights. So yeah.
Definitely.
All right, let's start diving in here, because we've got a cool topic in regards to analytics. When we discuss scaling server, what are some of the things that you guys see that you would offer in terms of advice for someone who's maybe just scaling for the first time from designer and getting into server? And we can start with like that very basic level and then work our way all the way up to huge environments today.
Well, I guess in terms of differences, what you get with server, well, first is a really good repository of your work. So think about designer being your development area and server being your production area. So once you're done with development, you can start running and scheduling workflows with server. And that's how I think when I think of an Alteryx developer that is migrating to server, right? So think about that concept and doing this process, even like with some features that server offers with versioning, which it's, you could use it in designer, but it would be a different way. But you'll have a version feature in server that you can control your development cycle. And I think in terms of that, I think scaling that way for a designer user is really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's something. It's really organic. After you start using Alteryx Designer, you start building a lot of workflows. You feel that something is missing. Maybe you want to share your analytical apps. Maybe you want to control better what you are doing, and that's when Alteryx Server enters to help you build all of that. Of course, you have a lot of options to scale from there, but that's I think this the first thing that you start noticing and feeling that you need something more.
Yeah, I think when we kind of talk about that, really one of the questions that I hear a lot is, how many workflows do you really need to justify an Alteryx server? What have you guys seen in terms of like number of Alteryx workflows that people have had before they've been interested in making the purchase or showing ROI for a server?
I guess not only number of workflows, of course, it's a metric that you can consider, but there are a lot of things like usage of all
Mhm.
Alteryx and the outputs, right? Not just Alteryx itself, not just development, but usage of that, how you can scale with analytical apps like Fernando mentioned, and things like um, uh, what Fernando mentioned as well, sharing that kind of like what I'm developing maybe not be someone in my team doesn't know what I'm doing, right? Doesn't really is a knowledge with what I'm doing. So in server, I can make that public, or even like if I want to restrict access, of course you have collections and studios to do that, but I can make that public to other people that might not even know what I'm doing, right? And the only thing that they need is just to access a gallery, the web page. So I guess in those terms, it's just not. I think a lot of server with collaborating, right? The collaboration aspect is really what makes a server really valuable, because it goes into all of the concepts of an end-to-end self-service analytics tool, and that's what Alteryx is trying to solve for you, basically, right? It's trying to democratize analytics for everyone in organizations.
Yeah, and when we kind of talk about collaboration, that's an important piece that you're touching on. Do you feel like it doesn't necessarily have to be collaborating with other individuals with a designer license, right? I think that's a piece that a lot of people assume is, hey, everybody else has to have a designer license as well for us to start collaborating. And I think a good shout out from that perspective is we've helped. There's a marketing client that I'm thinking of in particular with Dallas. It was literally just one workflow, and they were like, hey, we're going to
Mhm,
buy a server for this to start, right?
mhm.
Because we're literally going to see this used 50, 100 times a day, just the one workflow. And then from there, we're going to design other workflows which we'll find helpful and just kind of create more value. So I think that's something that I always like to see people getting excited about is focus on the value and the usage, like Dallas was saying, and then you can kind of drive things from there.
I was going to comment about a case that I know about buying Alteryx server. It was a customer that decided to buy at first with Alteryx Designer, but it was a matter of 3 workflows. But I think three is so much more than one, and so you won, Andrew.
Hey, that was one very painstaking workflow that Dallas and I worked on. But as we kind of talk about that, I really think that the number doesn't even really matter, right? It's really about the value. And when we talk about it, I think it's the same for the size of the servers, right? So you could have a single node server environment. You could go full SDLC, and we work with server environments where there's literally hundreds of Alteryx servers in a cluster. And I think that journey in terms of scaling is important. And when we discuss that, we'll be starting to share some assets relating to different server environments and recommendations that we have on our channel. So make sure you hit that like or love button so you can see some of that going forward. And when we talk about those environments, the first step is really around breaking out from that single server and then getting to worker nodes. So let's talk about worker nodes for a minute. What are some different ways that you've seen the worker nodes configured or used?
Well, I can talk a little bit about that. There's a really cool thing in server that is called worker tags, right? And I think that's a really interesting use case, because you can basically tag a specific worker or machine to run jobs for either any kind of differentiation you wanna make. Like if you wanna run jobs by department, for example, you want to dedicate workers for departments, or you want to dedicate workers, for example, for C-level executives, right? So the people that really need those workflows, they can't stay on queue, right? Because they're really urgent for that data is really urgent to be output. So you could tag that. You could tag that worker for that. You could tag a worker for ad hoc workflows or for scheduled workflows, for example. So you don't you don't create that competition of workflows running at the same time. If you have scheduled ones and you run an ad hoc one, and those get in queue, and maybe you're basically messing up your schedule. So I think scaling workers is really useful for that, because you get more processing power, of course. You can run more workflows at the same time. You can dedicate workflows. You can also tag them by priority, right? So you want to workflows that you just want a worker to run critical workflows. So you're gonna set up that worker machine with a lot of horsepower, so it doesn't fail. It's not gonna hold workflows on queue or something like that. So those things, I think, that can be done. Some of the things that can be done with workers, of course. Fernando or Andrew, you can add more to it.
Yeah, I think it's a very complete answer. I don't think I don't have much to add. The only thing I want to add is about the MP engine. Since you are tagging already, you can also use the MP engine for one worker and not to another.
And I think when we talk about those worker tags, I mean, I've seen so many different ways to kind of configure those. Everything from department model where each department has its own tag, and when we talk about that, that can elicit a chargeback model, right? So when we're discussing, for example, maybe the operations department or finance department, they want their own worker node. They don't have to buy a whole server by themselves. They could literally just buy the one worker node. And then when we talk about from a scaling perspective, they're only responsible for that. The admin responsibilities can be managed by IT. And then at that point, you don't have to worry about anybody interfering with your lane. Data package is another one that we see common to AMP, right? So when we talk about data package deployment, we don't want to have to update that every quarter on all the machines. That's a lot of storage and redundancy. So what we typically see is maybe one or two nodes have the data package and are responsible for that processing in particular, enriching with Experian data or doing the heavy geospatial analysis for drive time. And that creates some opportunity as we kind of see going forward for us to kind of take advantage of the resources that we're dedicating, especially when we're talking about Alteryx Server, because it can be deployed in the cloud, on-prem, or in a hybrid model. So if you want to see some of these, I would again recommend following us, because we're going to start posting some of these where literally we'll share some of the architecture diagrams. So if you want to see, hey, what would that look like in terms of if I had, maybe I'm thinking cloud forward and I want to have my primary node, which would be the Alteryx controller, as well as the gallery in the cloud. And I may have a worker node there, but I may still have a lot of data that exists on-prem from a variety of operating systems or enterprise systems that we have within ERP as an example. And from there, I want to make sure that I can process that data as closely as possible to the source, so we're not incurring a bunch of transient costs related to I/O or transfer rate. And when we discuss those components, that can allow you to have that worker node locally and explore it even further. What are some other things when we talk about that?
Yeah, another use case that I thought as well, that I remembered, Andrew, is you split them by region. And
Yes.
it's a good thing, because maybe with those companies that have subsidiaries around the world, they have data sources that are standing or data centers that are standing in a specific region. So if you think of the downtime that you have to transfer data across regions right now, if you set up a worker on APAC or EMEA or US or Latin America or something like that, you might reduce the downtime that you have when pulling that data from those regions. So that's a really good use case as well.
Yeah, what other ones have you seen, Fernando? Have you ever seen them deployed across around the world, like Talus is talking about, like maybe in AWS or other deployments?
Yeah, actually, for me personally, I'm more experiencing as a single node server environment. So actually, I'm learning a lot here. I'm more of a listener than a talker.
And I think that's the great part here is you're going to see a variety of skills, and I'm sure Fernando, you have mad skills with a single server environment, and being able to make one server and press it to the limits is a skill in and of itself, right? And as we kind of talk about that growing and scaling, I think we want to be conscious also of budget, right? Not everybody is like, yeah, I can spend $1 million on Alteryx next year. They may have to figure out different ways to kind of scale with what they have and make the best of it. Because like I always share with everybody, part of the reason why you're listening to us is probably because you want a promotion at some point, right? So you're like, I'm going to learn from these really cool guys and learn all their cool tips and tricks and get a promotion. So like all of you out there who would love to have a promotion, please like throw it in the chat and raise your hand there. We would love to see some of your guys' comments so we can make sure we're offering you advice that will take your career to the next level.
Definitely.
So Dallas, what are some of the other questions that you've kind of seen out there that we've collected over the last couple weeks in regards to server scaling?
Well, I have one here that we can discuss, Andrew. It's actually related to things that we should be using to determine how we should be dedicating our resources. So it's basically benchmark, right? Benchmark studies that you could use to dedicate our resources. Because whenever we think about planning our architecture here in a server, either if it's a single node or multi-node, I often see like some people that are kind of lost. Okay, how many nodes should I add? Should I have a separate worker node? Should I have a separate database? Should I have like a separate gallery node, load
Yeah.
balancer to control traffic? So Andrew, what do you think it could be? It could be a good thing to do when we talk about that.
Man, so this is a great question, and I love thinking in things of analogies that probably all of us have experienced in our everyday lives, and this one in particular, I like to relate to traffic, right? Everybody's gotten into a car, maybe not lately, but you have this distant fuzzy memory of what it was like to be stuck during rush hour, right? And as we're talking about this, I like to think of it as being lanes. And as we're talking about those lanes, in particular with the Alteryx server, you mentioned the queue before, and that's really around the number of simultaneous jobs that can exist at once or be processed at once. And when we talk about those lanes, they can be assigned with the worker tags, right? Or even by priority, and that would simulate maybe an HOV lane. So there's or a toll lane. So, hey, you've got to pay extra to get through here, or you've got to have 2 or more people in your workflow working on it at the same time. And then the other ways that we kind of see that are by like class of vehicle. So an example would be no semi trucks in the fast lane, right? And when we kind of explore those different aspects, my favorite visualization that we see is actually a matrix where it has number of concurrent users and then number of simultaneous jobs that can be on at once. And really what that helps depict is the amount of usage at any given time. And when we discuss that, that would be like ad hoc jobs that may be running as well as some of the scheduled ones, which those two offer a different variety. And what we see with that is sometimes those will be on different nodes. That way you can provide a good experience for someone who may be in a hurry, who says, hey, I'm coming to you because I need this right now. You have their attention, so we want to take advantage of that. And that's where I get excited with some of these aspects.
Yeah, and one of the really cool features that Alteryx offers as well is the Alteryx Server Usage Report, right? And that is maybe not for someone who already who is new to Server, but someone who's already using Server and they're thinking, okay, I think I might need to scale because my server is not handling all of the things that I'm putting into it. Maybe jobs or even other things like users accessing the gallery, like I said, or even the database is failing. I mean, we're getting a lot of database failures. So we can see most of that stuff in Alteryx Server Usage Report, and we can also measure that. The other thing that we can measure with that is the licensing usage. So it's really good when I saw a comment here talking about addressing budget, right? So when you think about that, when you have an Alteryx Server usage report and you can track the licensing usage of the designer users, you basically can do that. You can see maybe some people are using, maybe they're not using. Maybe I can focus on a specific department that is heavily using Alteryx. So that those things, I think, it helps a lot for you to be successful when implementing the platform as a whole.
Yeah, and budget is pretty critical, right? So as we're kind of talking about this, and this looks like it's from Eric, I think when we're talking about how do we digest it, and especially when you're on a conversation about scaling, the Alteryx Server Usage Report is really good at helping you understand what that looks like. And when we're discussing the lanes, right, you have the choice where we can scale up or scale out with Alteryx with those nodes by attacking on more cores vertically or spreading them out. The other aspect with that is also the workflows. So when are you executing them? So let's say there are obviously some companies who didn't have a great year when we're talking about 21 and 22 in terms of budget. And what you can look at is maybe we don't need all the reports at 9 a.m. on Monday morning, right? We may be able to space those out throughout the day, which allows us to kind of fulfill the usage of that server throughout the day and be able to capitalize on our existing resources, or if we need to even scale back, right? And then we can work on making the usage more robust before we continue to build out. And I think that's a critical factor that we may want to consider whenever we're looking at various budgets and looking for success. And when we discover that, the other thing that we can also discuss in terms of visible savings, right, is with Alteryx in particular, from a scaling factor, you can use it from an orchestration perspective. And when we discuss that, that could be in particular by using in-database tools. Like we haven't even started talking about those yet. And what I love about the in-database tools is, hey, I may not have money for more Alteryx Server this year, but what I can do is lean more heavily on our database, or let's say you have a Snowflake instance, right? We can auto scale that compute on demand and then go ahead and execute those workflows if you have the SQL skills or the query already built out. And then we can continue to grow in that manner using other resources that are connected to our Alteryx platform environment. Fernando,
Yeah.
do you have any stories you'd like to share about in database tools?
Yeah, not about in database, but the previous question about the budget. I
Yeah.
think it's also related to in database as well. Since I'm the single node expert, right? So contextualizing, I'm more used to the Brazilian market. So there it's everything plus 6. And to give a context, if you think about an Alteryx designer, in I think in US we have a designer costs one month salary, and when we think about the designer in Brazil, it's almost a year of a salary of an
Wow.
analyst. So it's pretty expensive there, and it's always about the budget. So for us, I know we are talking about scale the server to add resources, but one thing that we usually do there is to think about first how we can optimize our workflows. So we are kind of scaling by adding, optimizing everything to be able to run more workflows, but without adding any research. That's something that we always do because we are always concerned about the money there.
Man, 2 resources. Fernando, let's see those guns a little bit. You got twice the resources in those arms there. That's pretty impressive. Yeah. Yeah. Dallas, you had something else to add there?
No, yeah. What I was gonna talk is that the savings perspective is really it's really something that I think we, especially when we are talking about what Alteryx, what kind of value Alteryx brings to the
Mm,
company, right? So we have to be really, I think, be really smart on that, and because I see a lot of sometimes we see like we're called on those. Actions to maybe do a health check of a server or something like that, and we see that people are looking for a way to optimize their usage, and of course that is totally related to not just savings but justifying the value, right? If a department buys the platform, buys the tool, they need to justify that value. So I think this is really it's really important to focus on that sometimes,
mm.
because we might not have the ideal infrastructure and the ideal thing. And one really cool thing is when we connect server to cloud, we really have that flexibility, like you said, Andrew. So you can, if server is in the cloud, you can scale up really easily, or you can maybe, if you have like a sandbox environment or something that you might not use all the time, you can put it down for time that you don't use, right? You have that flexibility, and you can make some savings out of this. So
Yeah, we
it's
even do
really
that with our own server, right?
yeah.
Literally here at Data Meaning, because we're not running things in the middle of the night on our demo environments. So we spin those down, and that literally means 8 hours of the day you're not running the server, and that's cost savings that's available to you
Hmm.
from a hardware perspective. And when we talk about that, I think a lot of people forget there's many different levers that we can kind of pull in terms of saving dollars and then also spending them, right? So if we're talking about spending dollars, there's obviously different ways that we can kind of play with those dollars. Some of them are from operating budgets, right? So that could be the cost of your actual licenses, et cetera. And then from a hardware perspective, that may actually be from a capital expenditure budget that's coming from. And as we talk about those CapEx expenditures, that may relate to, hey, we don't have any money in the operating budget this year, but we need more Alteryx resources. Remember that an Alteryx server sits on a three-legged stool, which is really the CPU, which you are paying for, right, for the cores. The other two are actually the disk as well as the RAM. And when we talk about these three, really we can make sure that we're working with all three of those to make our environment robust, which will allow for greater throughput in terms of those workflows and insights.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think let's grab another question out of the hat in regards to, let's see, we have one from Kate, and she's, let's see, Kansas. So what is the best way to determine how many worker nodes I need?
Yeah, I guess. Well, from my perspective, is we talked about a little bit of that, but it's the usage
Hmm.
that we need to measure. And one thing that we didn't talk about is actually that the benchmark recommendation, general recommendation, would be using number of cores divided by 2 when we're thinking about running workflows at the same time, right? So there's a system setting that you can define when you're configuring server, and so this is something that is that you really need to watch out for, because like you said, Andrew, you maybe you're scheduling like 10 jobs at a specific time at 9 a.m. Like we have 10 users. So if you have that situation and you have a 4-core server, you're probably gonna get in trouble, because those workflows will not run at 9 a.m. right? They will get in queue, and then they will have to wait for first in first out, that kind of rule. So of course this will impact. So that's a way to think of, how many worker nodes do I actually need. And the other thing is what we talked about, if we need like to run high priority workflows, or if we need to divide our work into specific divisions or departments or stuff. So I guess all of that can be, and the nice thing, people often ask that, okay, is there a right answer for that? No, there's no right answer. It's really custom, right? It really, server, I think it's a really a platform that is really flexible for your business. So in that case, there are many different ways to implement a right solution, and there's no right answer. I mean, maybe the solution that you do is better because of this or that, and a different approach would bring some advantages, but other disadvantages. So it's really about the way that your company works. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I would think being really practical about. I know that Alice comment that the number of workflows is not always that important, but that is something that I would always think at first. So first I would think of number of the workflows, the time, that the execution time, and then I would think of maybe if we need a redundancy or all the other things about separate the workflows by areas or something like that. So without thinking about the importance of the workflows, I would think of that criteria.
Definitely. And I think when we talk about those different workflows, when they're going to execute, because runtime comes into effect, right? So when we're talking about runtime and scaling the environment, another issue that kind of comes up is how do we make it uh, create high availability? And some of the first components around that are really around separating out the MongoDB instance, right? Alteryx sells a specific license that allows you to create high availability for the controller instance, which will give you an active controller as well as passive ones. But when we separate out the Mongo environment, that's what really starts making the difference. And something that I want to call out, Dallas, because you brought up the Mongo connector, right? And when we're working on doing some backups of our environment, maybe we're working with a single node environment to get started, right? That means if you have an embedded user managed Mongo instance, sorry, just an embedded instance, that means you literally have to shut the server down, the services, conduct the backup, and fire it back up. Now, that can only take a couple minutes, or it can take like an hour, depending on how robust your environment is. But as we kind of talk about this, there are different ways that you can do user manage Mongo, and that is actually one of the first steps that you have to do to get to high availability. So when we discuss that in particular, there's essentially 3 paths that you can outline from a MongoDB perspective, and these are completely separate from Alteryx. So Alteryx has no control over these outside of the embedded Mongo, right? The first one is really going to be around utilizing their free version or their open source Mongo version, which you can just go and download and then install on the server yourself. The second one that exists is going to be the enterprise version, which has support. So remember, if you get the open source one, there's no support unless you go out on the community and Stack Overflow and just ask some questions, right? And hopefully they don't blast you for asking something silly. And then the final one is actually a cloud offering that that Mongo has called Mongo Atlas. And this year is the first year that Alteryx has offered that, showing that it's capable of integrating with it. And that cloud offering actually allows for you not to have to take down the server at all in regards to the backup. Literally, it can just conduct that backup on its own without requiring any heavy sophistication on you as an admin to be able to accomplish that. And that really allows you to take your admin capabilities to the next level without necessarily having to become an expert in Mongo or have that within your IT department as well. And then we do have a question here from Aiden around, do we have tools to do performance testing or simulation workflows? There actually are a couple of those out on the community, or if you want to reach out to us, we can provide those workflows as well. There's some older documentation, I think it's from like 2018, where it shows like load testing and stuff in regards to some standard Alteryx workflows and then how that's conducting on your server. Some of that actually is what got turned into the base for the Alteryx server usage report. So I hope that was helpful for you, Aiden. I just definitely recommend typing that into the Alteryx public gallery to kind of see that.
Yeah, I think also about that, about performance, we have in the designer level as well. We have the performance profiling, so that is the first tool I use to optimize a workflow, for instance.
Awesome. And then there's also like you can even do the performance profiling on your desktop, right? So I think when we talk about this, you can start local on your desktop and say, okay, now that I know roughly how it performs on my hardware, how is it performing on the server? And what you'll notice there is it could even be down to the tools that you have in your workflow. So don't necessarily assume that the performance that you're experiencing is tied to the hardware that's associated with where you're running the workflow. It could also be related to the networking and the bandwidth. And it could just be taking a long time for that input tool to pull the data in. And you may have a bad server from a DBA perspective, right? And we may want to adjust that query or when the query, what time of day that query is running. And then Alteryx can do some crazy things like with the dynamic inputs where it's doing multiple of those requests at the same time. So from a DBA perspective, you also see that whenever you're scaling out. So just make sure your DBAs are conscious of that so they don't go in and try and kill your queries thinking that someone's attacking your database servers. Do you guys have any fun stories about that?
Yeah, I might have, but I don't want to talk about that.
Bad memories, right? Bad memories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and I think there are definitely instances that exists.
Yeah,
so
but
like
what I can say is that they usually get mad.
They get mad.
Yeah, the DBAs.
Hey, let's use positive words. They get a little excited, right? Protecting their server. They're like, hey, what's going on here? Why do you got 20 server?
Yeah, they are correct. They're actually, that's what you said. I mean, their job is to make sure that the database is working properly. But yeah, there's usually some kind of miscommunication because it takes some time sometimes to for them to understand how how Alteryx Designer works with the databases as well. So Yeah, sometimes it's just a little bit hard to explain to them. Okay, yeah, that's what I was doing. I was not trying to overload the database for some reason or something like that, you know.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit more. We've got a tough question. This one's from Tom. Oh, actually, he's from Florida as well. Thanks, Tom, for reaching out to us from Miami. And he's asking, does Alteryx provide a disaster recovery plan? So the answer to that one is no. So as we're talking about servers in particular, it does have high availability. It doesn't, from the traditional sense, hey, the entire server goes down, and then we're going to have a whole nother instance spin up. Think of it as being little components that each have their own redundancy. So when we discuss this, Dallas talked a little bit about the redundancy from the worker side, right? And then we've talked about separating out the MongoDB instance, which is that persistence layer. So you can have a Mongo cluster, which will allow for sharding and redundancy there. And then we've talked about high availability for the controller, which allows for you to have redundancy on the controller instance, which is like the heart and the brains of the operation. And then the final component that we haven't discussed is the gallery, which you can have multiple galleries with a load balancer in front of it. So essentially you can see each instance can have its own area of redundancy. And when we talk about that, Thales brought up an amazing point from a region's perspective. If we were concerned about a region going down, we can actually establish redundancy across regions. Like there was that recent scare where there was a bomber who was looking at the AWS data centers as a target, and you could potentially have that same infrastructure, just like here in Florida, you could have a hurricane if you had all your data on site. We want to make sure that that redundancy exists from a disaster perspective, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that you need a whole DRP plan if the entire system goes down. It could be the redundancy that already exists within the platform split across those regions.
Nice.
And we're kind of wrapping up here in the last 10 minutes. Are there any other fun topics that you guys want to talk about that you've encountered with scaling the server? I know, Dallas, you have some stuff around SDLC and migrating workflows. Do you want to do a little bit of a teaser there, sharing some of what you've been working on with different clients in regards to that?
Yeah, I guess a lot of clients ask, how would I set up a development, a whole cycle there, for development, production, testing, QA, UAT, or whatever people call out there. But basically, there are different ways, right, of doing that with the server. Some clients, there are different ways for different clients as well, right? Some clients have the budget to buy multiple servers. Some of them don't. So, like I said, what I think is, for single node clients, for example, they might, you can always treat server as a production layer, right, and the designer as development. So if you're thinking of a really simple thing, you can think it that way. Of course, you can also use, for logical separators, let's say. It's not really an automated thing or anything like that, but you can use collections, for example. You could create a dev collection, a QA collection, a prod collection, where you would basically go there, upload a workflow. Some person would check that workflow, and then you could download that workflow and upload to a QA collection and do the user testing there. Maybe a user needs to run a workflow or needs to run an analytical app, and then once you're done, you can upload to a prod collection. You have those logical layers that you can use to implement something like that. There's also versioning. You could use different versions of a specific workflow and make the official one, the production one, the published version, what we call the published version, which is the version available to the users, right? And you can change in between if you need to. And of course, the best way would be having a sandbox server and a production server. And when I talk about server, I mean two different galleries, right? Not just like different nodes in the server. So you would have two different galleries, and you would have the API to help you migrate the workflows from a dev environment, from a dev gallery to a prod gallery. And the APIs can do a lot of things like flagging those workflows. They can download the workflows and publish the workflows in the new server. So think about different creative ways that you can do it. And you can do that with coding. If you have experts that know how to handle APIs with a specific code language. Otherwise, you could just do in Designer, set up workflows that call the APIs, and even schedule those workflows. Why not in the server? So you see, like you open a different, a very big, a big world of opportunities. Let's say, wide perspective there.
I think one call out that I definitely want to make is if you are interested in doing a sandbox server, make sure you talk with your rep, because they offer a hefty discount for a sandbox environment, and that license will mirror whatever you have in production. So as we kind of talk about this, it offers a unique opportunity for your users in your environment to kind of test out their workflows, because obviously, as much as we enjoy testing in production, we don't enjoy dealing with necessarily needing to call out that disaster recovery plan or those different aspects. So if we have workflows that have been tested, then we can kind of go through as admins and validate what that looks like. Is it good quality work? Is it connecting to the right data sources, etc.? And then as Thales is highlighting, you have those other layers that exist. So as you migrate through your different environments, you can make sure you're setting yourself up for success. And that also provides transparency for you to see how many workflows are coming. Do I need to be prepared for my next year's budget, like Eric was talking about? Hey, we still need to scale out our server. Even though the usage isn't that heavy today, I see 100 additional workflows that are coming because everybody's been focused now working from home, and they've got a lot of workflows that they're going to put in production come the end of the year. Or maybe we're at the end of the quarter right now, so it may be a new fiscal year for you. And we may see some of that stuff coming online. And that also highlights taking a look at your server usage, right? When are you seeing kind of those high points occurring? What's kind of the reporting cadence that you're seeing? For some customers, do you see it happening on a daily, weekly basis? Others may see it monthly, quarterly, right? And Adam here is asking, can you use Jenkins to do this? And the answer is yes. And we have a number of customers, especially like in the financial sector, who love Jenkins for doing the migration from dev to prod. We also see a lot of that with Azure DevOps, right? So when we talk about this, it highlights a good point that Dallas had done. You can use the server API to be able to do that, as well as if you've got some bat scripts that you want to process, you can use Python code. And we'll be touching on a lot of that tomorrow in regards to opportunities and capabilities that you have to kind of increase what your server has to offer. And then we'll also talk about some of the risks and exposure that will exist there for what you're receiving from a log perspective, depending on the approach that you choose, because we want to make sure that we're able to report, especially when you're in an audit environment, to be able to accomplish all that successfully. And I know we're on the last few minutes here. Do you guys have anything fun that you're going to be doing as we're going into a 3-day weekend?
I'm gonna be honest with you. Since well, at least for me, like we're based in Brazil, right? So we usually use these holidays to put our lives together. Yeah. Because it's not a holiday here in Brazil, so we're able to. I'm gonna be honest, with you, I have to handle a couple of things that in my personal life, like putting my putting up my documents in order and things like that,
Nice.
and taking care of that. So uh, yeah, that's what I usually use those U.S. holidays here in Brazil.
And you're going to use Alteryx to organize some of those documents, right? You've got the tools to
Ah,
kind of do that.
I always do. I use Alteryx for like even like to setting up things in correct folders. I'm sometimes I'm when I have like some spare time, I like to do that. Uh, it doesn't always work perfectly because at the end I end up messing everything for some reason.
And Fernando, I don't know whether you're going to be doing some new training stuff or are you just going to be hanging out by the beach because you already have your workflow set up for your mom, so you can just kind of kick back and relax, right?
Yeah, but for me, due to COVID, I will be at home. Actually, I'm rewatching Lost series, so I'm in the last
Ooh,
season. I have no idea what happened, but that's what I'm gonna be doing. And actually, I playing chess also.
playing
I
chess.
yeah,
Oh
I
man.
restarted playing chess due to COVID, since I love to do sports, so it's something that I can do.
Yeah, I think you should check out on Netflix. There's the Queen's Gambit.
Yeah, yeah,
That was a really good one. I love
that's
that one.
a great series.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up for today. Thank you everyone for watching. I really appreciate you guys joining us today. And remember that this is part 2 of a 3-part series, so don't forget to join us tomorrow at noon. And we look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Have a great day and see you tomorrow.
Bye bye, everyone.